No, here we are. Okay. Yay. My apologies. Pickle in a pickle. Rufus Took, who many called Pickle due to his love of the vinegary vegetables, was always said to be a carpenter. When he was a small hobbit lad, growing up in the great smiles of Tuckborough in the West Farthing, he even played more with his father's hammer than with his own toys. Oh, how he howled when one day he gave his thumb such a smack with that hammer that it took the nail off. Not one to fret too much, however, he never lost his love of working with tools. He continued that passion and eventually learned all about carpentry and woodworking from his father. The skills of Pickle were legendary, and he was even asked by the Thane to work on expanding the leader's mighty hobbit hole. There, in his beloved Tuckborough, is where the unfortunate accident happened to poor Pickle. He was working away, carving beautiful flower patterns in an overhead beam in the hobbit hole, when a chunk of the roof gave way. Oh, it wasn't Pickle's fault, not at all, but it was a terrible accident that he would bear the brunt of for the rest of his life. He lost his left arm under the falling debris. Now, Pickle was not about to let something like that get him down. He was so good at his craft that he fashioned for himself a beautiful wooden arm. With a fanciful twist of his shoulder muscles, he could even make the fingers of the wooden hand grasp strong enough to hold a pint of ale in the pub. Everyone was amazed and praised him for his skill. Of course, one should never be too proud of one's own creations, should they? It was, after all, the wooden arm that got Pickle into such a pickle of a problem. When he had grown into an old hobbit, the wooden arm no longer rested right against his aged and thinning body. One night at the pub, a terrible fire broke out, as almost happened here. The fire was the most frightful scene in the Shire. When Pickle was trying to flee from the pub with the others, he found himself stuck amidst the flames, for the crafty arm had accidentally taken hold of a heavy table all on its own and held him fast. Oh, the flames were hot. Pickle was burnt to a cinder. Yet, charmed hobbit that he was, he suddenly found himself outside the pub in the cold night air. He called out to the other hobbits to let them know that he had escaped the blaze, but they did not seem to hear him. No amount of shouting would get their attention. Just before Pickle gave up in frustration, a black carriage came along the roadway with the prettiest young hobbit lass inside that he had ever seen. She was very pale and had the most beautiful curly black hair that contrasted so beguilingly against her skin. The carriage stopped and the hobbit lass leaned out and smiled at Pickle. Her eyes sparkled as she called out, "Pickle, will you join me for a ride?" He was more than glad to have someone speak to him, so he hopped inside beside her. "We have to make a small call on a friend," the lass said, her voice bright and cheery despite her outward cold appearance. Pickle nodded, but was surprised when they stopped at the low wall of the graveyard. Perhaps Pickle thought the young lass knew the groundskeeper. "Oh no, Pickle, this stop is for you. Go inside, for my friend wishes to speak with you." The pretty hobbit seemed to be Pickle's only friend now, and he did not wish to disappoint her. So he jumped down from the carriage and went into the graveyard. He wondered who her friend could possibly be. Hobbit graveyards are particular places. There are no stones like the big folk use, other, of course, than the rocks used to build the low wall that surround them. There are only trees and other plants atop the graves to mark the resting places of those who have gone before. The yards are well tended and pretty as any park, though none would think to bring a child there to play or pick strawberries from the places when it was a sweet Nonetheless, Pickle marched on to look for the lass's friend. It was not hard to find him. A giant worm, wearing a bright waistcoat with golden buttons, sat in the center of the yard. He was a most polite fellow who greeted the old hobbit with a bow of his lidless head. "Ah, Rufus Took, I'm glad to make your acquaintance. Are you ready to go to your rest?" "What are you talking about?" asked the hobbit. "Why, my good fellow, you are dead. Didn't my friend, sweet Miss Death, tell you?" the worm asked Pickle. "No, that is news to me." "Well, you are. And I am most embarrassed to have to be the one to break the news to you, naughty Miss Death. I would have to speak with her on this matter. But let us attend to you first, my friend. Give me your body, and we can clear matters up. You can then go to your rest." "My body? What do you mean? I'm standing right here," Pickle said in confusion. "My good fellow, you are not. I need your ashes from the pub fire. You go back now and bring them to me, and we will send you on your way." Pickle grumbled under his breath, but shrugged his shoulders and headed back to the carriage. "I have to go back," he explained to pretty Miss Death. "I need my ashes from the pub." She turned the carriage around, and they headed back to Tuckborough. They were quiet for some time before Pickle finally broke the awkward silence. "You know," he said, in what he hoped was a conversational tone, "you could have told me I was dead. I would not have minded." "I'm sorry," she replied, glad that he was not angry. "You looked so frightened and alone when your friends did not see or hear you. I did not wish to upset you further. Imagine how you would have felt if I had greeted you. 'Hello there, I'm Miss Death. Want to come for a ride?'" They both had a good laugh, and Pickle said, "That was kind of you to consider my feelings." "It isn't an easy job," she said ruefully. "I'd imagine not." Back at the pub, Pickle worked hard to sweep his remains into a bag the lass had given him. It was dirty work, but he was soon done. They returned to the graveyard, and the worm opened the bag and felt around inside with the end of his long tail. "Oh, my, something is missing," the big fellow said. "That cannot be. I cleaned the spot right good. Oh, sorry. Your arm. Your left arm is missing." Pickle sighed. Of course it was missing. He had lost it so long ago that he rarely even thought about it anymore. Alas, he had to go back to Tuckborough with Miss Death so he could search for what had happened to his missing limb. Time dragged on, night after night, and finally Miss Death had to leave him to pick up others for their meeting with the worm. Occasionally, Pickle tried really hard to ask someone in Tuckborough for help, and he thought he saw a glimmer in their eyes, that they saw him, or perhaps heard him. They would pause as if listening, but then they moved on with whatever they had been doing. Eventually, Pickle did find where his arm had been buried so many long years ago. He was able to retrieve the bones and add them to his bag. The pretty hobbit lass of Death returned for him in her black carriage, and they were off once more for the graveyard and the worm. "Pickle," asked the worm as he scratched his head with the end of his tail. "Oh, yes, I had almost given hope on you. Good fellow. Now, let's have your remains." The old hobbit opened the bag and held it up for the worm to inspect with his delicate tail. "Oh, my. Something is missing." "That cannot be. I gathered everything." The blind head of the great worm shook sadly from side to side. "It seems there is a thumbnail missing." "Oh, come now, surely you will not hold that against me." The worm was most somber when he said, "There are rules, my good hobbit. Rules to follow. Where would we be without rules? Chaos, I tell you. Sorry now, but be off with you, and don't come back without that nail." So, poor Pickle returned to the carriage and told his friend Miss Death about the nail. Such a small thing, That will surely be hard to find, she said sympathetically. I'm determined, though, said Pickle. So the carriage returned yet again to Tuckborough, where the old hobbit had spent his entire life. I'm sorry, Pickle, said the lass, but I'm a busy hobbit with lots of responsibilities. Pickle laughed and nodded his head understandingly. Don't worry yourself. I know you cannot wait on me forever, but please do stop by once in a while to see if I have had any luck, will you? She smiled at him, such a charming smile, and she promised. At least once every 100 years, she vowed. She would stop and see if he had any luck completing his task. She gave the old hobbit a kiss on the cheek and went off in her carriage, leaving him alone. Poor Rufus Pickle Took had run out of luck. He remained forever walking the halls of Tuckborough, searching high and low. Eventually, hobbits started catching glimpses of him, or thought they heard something faint when he spoke to himself in the dark passages of the labyrinth hobbit holes of the Tooks. After some time, the hobbits got used to his unseen presence. They even came to make light of it, asking each other, "Have you heard from Great Uncle Pickle lately?" And in the end, the unfortunate ghost of the hobbit drew comfort from that. For try as he might, he never did find that missing nail.